Ready to go? Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Clark Beard. I'm the secretary, but I'm acting as the president tonight. I'll call the meeting of the Area Plan Commission for October 4th to order. Can we have a roll call for attendance? Quorum
Jordan Brewer is absent, Dan Sheets is absent, Clark Beard,
here.
Walt Minnick,
Here.
Andy Bailey,
Here.
Mike Evans is absent.
Grant.
And Grant, that's who, let's see, I'm missing one. Grant,
They'll get you on the list one of the
all right,
days.
Grant.
Here.
Grant, I thought I had you on the list.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're good.
Like, I'm
Okay.
missing one, so they're making it down.
All right. Well, we do have a quorum.
We do.
That's the important thing. Okay, so meeting's called to order, and we'll call, disposition of the minutes from,
September 6th.
September the sixth. I'd entertain a motion to approve or make corrections to those.
I don't see any corrections, so I'll move to, approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, it's been moved by Andy, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Grant seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Any old business?
No old business.
Okay, so we'll move on into the
Oh, because Clark needs to sign.
the public hearings. There we go, that's about. And the first, application is, CC 2022 00900, docket number 12 22 RZ, is a petition of, Carla Zambrano and Alfredo Acevedo. Did I do pretty good on that? Yeah. Asking for a rezone. Liz, could we have the staff report?
Definitely. So, as a reminder, as always, when we come into rezoning hearings for the board, the Plan Commission is a recommending body in the case of a rezoning. In this case, you'll be sending a recommendation to the Clinton County Commissioners, since this is in the unincorporated areas. You can send a favorable, unfavorable, or a neutral, for lack of a better word, a complete lack of recommendation to them. Based upon your analysis from the land use perspective, they are not bound, so audience members know as well, commissioners are not bound to the Plan Commission's recommendation. They take that into account along with whatever other information they find to be relevant when they make a final decision. So with that in mind, this is an application requesting the rezoning of land from R2 low density residential to B2 central business. And I would note, sort of as a precursor, this is an unusual one, because there really wasn't an ideal zoning district in this situation, for the use. R2 is what we have within a half mile to a mile of the corporate limits of any of our towns or cities, so that's why this is R2. You do have B4 across the road, but we really try to steer people away from B4 unless it's needed, because it's one step shy of industrial, so that's where your junkyards, your automobile type uses can go without any extra hearings. And it just, there wasn't something perfect. Agriculture would have worked, but there's no other ag near them. And it's a weird spot for a grain farm or something to end up. So B2 ended up being a compromise, even though it's not a perfect fit, what we recommended them to ask for. There were some other business districts in which their use would be a special exception, but they wanted to try to minimize their hearings. So that's why B2. So on that note, the site is 3.5 acres on the west side of North State 75. It's between 100 North and 200 North in Union Township. The petitioner would like to rezone the property in order to operate a reception hall in a former church structure that sits on the petition site. And the reuse will be an event center and a reception hall type use. This site does fall within Frankfurt's urban growth area boundary that's earmarked for eventual annexation. And I would note, in rezonings, you don't just look at the use that they're hoping to have, but in general, what kinds of uses can go there otherwise. Which in the case of B2, you're looking at a mostly retail, doctor's offices. There's some recreation, like lifting, an indoor gym for lifting would be a permitting use. The kinds of things you picture in a downtown would be the kinds of uses that would be permitted.
I think a special exception use also would be, for daycare. Cause
I
that
think
really,
daycares are a special exception use in the B
two,
two district, I think you're right.
and
Automobile uses and industrial uses are, either prohibited or special exceptions depending on what they are. As are, uses that have a lot of outdoor storage and those kinds of things. Agricultural uses are, generally not permitted at all, other than just, cash farming, corn or beans. So there's a picture on the next page that just shows you what the structure looks like from 75. There's 5 criteria that the Plan Commission and the Clinton County Commissioners should pay reasonable regard to as they evaluate a rezoning request. Those are contained in section 201.01C of the Unified Development Ordinance. So first, the most recently adopted comprehensive plan. So the Union Township Future Land Use Map for the 2012 Clinton County Comprehensive Plan designates this area for low-density residential use, with an area for general business less than a quarter of a mile northeast from the petition site. Although the plan does designate low-density residential use, this petition site has a former church building on the property that appears to be in good condition. But as it's zoned residentially and of excessive size to be most suited for a home, there's not much in the way of use options for it. Additionally, to convert it to a residential structure, you're looking at a major remodeling, since this is a pole barn style church rather than an older one where you already have rooms broken out, and windows that meet egress in many cases. So it would be fairly substantial. The building itself would not require much modification to continue its use as a commercial property being used for public gathering, and it would no longer be a vacant building, which has been its status for several years. It is very close to the existing business area. It also is close relative to the old rail line, the lagoons, and the edge of the road right of way, and those things limit the potential for a residential subdivision to fit in this space if you were to try to tear the church down and replace it with 6 homes on those 3 acres. 2, current conditions and the character of the structure and uses of each district. So the requested B2 zoning will be less intense than any other business zoning district that allows a reception hall in any way, shape, or form. And it would be an asset in the location, given that you have a church building and a paved parking lot that already exist. It would prove to be a positive development in terms of allowing the building not to continue to be vacant and fall into disrepair. The petitioner states the interior is all open with the exception of the restroom facilities, and their plans are to leave it that way and do only cosmetic renovations. Of course, because it is a change of use, it will require both state and local review. Since churches have some religious exemptions that are different than reception halls. There'll be some landscaping and buffer yards and other things that'll kick in with the change of use. A state design release and inspection from the county inspector and fire inspector will be required before a certificate of occupancy can be issued. 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted. So this ground is zoned residential, but the structure is a former church. Churches are permitted in residential districts, and for that matter, in all districts. This church actually was built very close to the period of time when the county lost a religious rights lawsuit with the Wesleyan Church over by Colfax, and not just us, but many plan commissions across the country were running into the same thing, where the Supreme Court was drawing lines to say what could and couldn't be regulated in land use with respect to churches. So that's sort of how it went in that same era. It was right after we lost that suit and others lost that suit, and the county kind of recognized this isn't a use that you can refuse to allow pretty much wherever it ends up wanting to locate, as long as it's not creating a flooding problem or something like that that's material in its effect. The plans for the proposed use will be a similar or a less intense commercial use than a church typically is. Since churches often have gatherings nearly every night of the week. Reception halls, we have a number of them now in the community. Most of them have most of their gatherings on weekends, at least those of any size. But certainly you're gonna have a similar occupancy load and type of use and how it's being used. Through events, it would seem to be a desirable outcome for the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. So regardless of what would be ideal if this was vacant ground, the commercial building already exists, as does the paved parking lot. It's been vacant for several years. Removing this kind of infrastructure has a pretty significant, cost, and if it's not fallen into disrepair, it's not something that usually happens unless there's a good reuse that's gonna prove to make sense. So putting a similar intensity of use to what's been there in the past would seem to have a more positive effect on nearby values and allowing the building to sit vacant and deteriorate. 5, responsible growth and development. The exterior character of the building has a commercial appearance. Using it as a vent and reception hall would be more practical than converting it to residential. The proposal seems to be a positive reuse for the petition site. So consequently, staff does recommend approval and to favorably certify the rezoning application to the Clinton County Commissioners. Given the unique situation of an existing building on the site and having to pick between districts to work with a non-religious reuse, staff would remind the board that if there's concerns about the characteristics or behavior of the potential uses that might locate on the site in the future, commitments can be added to rezonings to restrict what may or may not happen, although a commitment should generally involve a use, not something incredibly odd and micro. So just as a reminder, I do know we have had some contact from neighbors that have some concerns, and I think they're here this evening to be able to represent themselves in that discourse. And we've had that contact since we wrote the staff report, but I am aware of it, and certainly those discussions should be had, but that's where we stand to our knowledge at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. That's very complete, and welcome everyone. It's good to see interest in what's going on in our community and attendance tonight. I have a housekeeping question because we've only been doing the Zoom live meeting. This meeting is on YouTube, so everyone should know that. And what should be our procedure, Liz, for the microphone?
So anyone that's speaking needs to go to the microphone. If for whatever reason you begin to find yourself having, I mean, sometimes you ask a question and people just answer, then the important thing is that if you're the board member that asks the question, the most appropriate thing is to repeat the answer you received before you continue with your next comment. So that way anyone that's watching understands the gist
Okay.
of what, what the answer was and who gave it. But as much as possible, trying to get people to the mic, especially if they have more than a 1 or 2 word answer.
Okay. So with that said, I'm going to ask everyone to, step out of your comfort zone possibly and go to the podium and speak on the microphone, so that everyone that's watching, both here and at home, can hear you. So, okay, so the applicants are here. Do you have anything further to add to the staff report that Liz has spelled out for us? Yes. Oh, give us your names to anyone that speaks. Okay. Okay, Carla and Alfredo.
Alfredo Alfredo, yeah. Nothing more really, just want to use it for small events, birthday parties, baby showers, small get-togethers people want to have, stuff like that.
Okay. Go ahead, Carla.
Well, I did hear some concerns while we were getting seated down. I did hear they were concerned about having any music outside or that kind of stuff, like too late or anything. Honestly, we're trying to keep our clients to like baby showers, birthday parties, bridal showers, graduation, something simple. We don't want anything big over the top to disturb anyone. And if there are events and they're renting out the space, where it's going to be inside, it's not going to be outside events or anything. So you will see obviously like parking and people arriving and leaving, but hopefully nothing big. We do want people that are going to take care of our space. We don't want them to destroy it, so we don't want anything crazy or anything over the top like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, next then is we open the floor for any other comments from those who are attending. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say regarding this application? Okay.
I don't have a lot.
Okay. We all know you, but state your name anyway.
I'm Mark Hodges. Basically, I'm sympathetic to them wanting to do something nice there. I looked at the property really closely, and I was advised not to buy it because the mineral rights are retained by the Jehovah Witness Church, and that put some cloud on the title of it. So, I mean, I think baby showers sound great to me, and birthday parties and stuff like that. I was worried I also was ignorant to the fact that my farm ground was already zoned residential. I've not ever been really too involved in the county zoning, and I just didn't know that. I thought it was zoned agriculture. So Liz explained to me about the different choices and how the business 2 was
B2.
probably the safest thing, because I am concerned when they're done with it, like what could happen to it next. And I don't know how you would write things into there to prevent that, but I would certainly like somebody to consider the possibility of that. I mean, I'm concerned about excessive noise if it's all inside. That's not going to be a problem. I don't want a whole lot of people, coming across onto the farm property. There's the lagoons there, and people tend to come down through my property to get up into the lagoons and stuff already, so I hope that won't be involved, but if it's inside, it won't be. So basically, I just came because I want to know what's going on, and if there's anything we can do to protect the area in the future. It just seems like there's a lot more bad things that can happen out there than good in some instances, and I think that that one industrial park that's there now kind of slipped in back when zoning was really not that tight, and now we've got that little triangle in there, and they don't cause any problems, but I would hate to see that grow. So,
I'm
yeah.
sure that was before zoning.
Probably.
Yeah.
I've lived out there for about 36 years, I guess. I've owned that property. So, yeah, so I'm sympathetic. It's got to be used for something, and baby shower sounds pretty good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Would anyone else care to comment?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
My name is Nelson Slifer. And I'll echo the same things that Mark says. I am sympathetic that it does need to be used for something rather than just sitting and going to waste. I am surprised about the zoning as well, because we have the farm across the road, 300-some acres, and it's been that way for 100 years, so I don't know why it wouldn't be agricultural. But be that as it may, I am concerned about the future. And if we could get any assurances that it won't be used for late-night parties and outside bands and those kind of things, I think would be great. But the future is probably even more important to us, because we intend on holding on to being in the area for some time. So,
All right, thank you. And just repeating what Liz told you, we don't make the final decision here. This, if it does get passed on, it'll end up with the commissioners having the final say-so here. Anyone else? Well, then I'll turn to the board.
Could I ask one question?
Yes?
If there is anything done, like Liz mentioned, about putting some type of constraints on the future use or limitations on what they're doing now, when would that happen in the process?
It could happen either at this level with the board as a recommendation, which then the commissioners could choose to take or not take, or the commissioners could put something on at their point in time. So usually if the plan commission puts it, then we have a pre-signed document ready to record for whatever those are. The thing you have to be careful with rezoning conditions is those commitments run with the land for any use, not just this use. So if, say, you say no buildings can be red because you're worried about a red building, but then the use changes and it makes sense for something to be red, and all of a sudden you're running against it. So some things are better handled by the use. I was actually looking up, I don't think amphitheaters are permitted uses in B2, reception halls or, your indoor gathering places. I was just going to look right now to see how amphitheaters were handled, but I'm pretty sure amphitheaters require a different zoning district. Now, conditions that might make sense is if you didn't want any doctor's offices there, like sometimes you see on rezonings, like, okay, the district's fine, but these uses concern us, so we wanna make sure there's a restriction that prevents those from occurring. You know, I think you could look at something carefully worded if the concern was outdoor events, but the counter caution to that is, somebody, I mean, everyone in this room seems very reasonable, but somebody unreasonable, let's say that building changes hands and someone has retail sales there and they have a day when Girl Scouts sell baked goods outside of the front door. That just turned into an outdoor event and now you call the whole zoning into question and you're gonna remove the district because of one thing that happened on one day. So you can get that law of unintended consequences and making sure you're targeting something that you don't want in any use, no matter what it is, and it's worded in such a way as to be reasonably enforceable, versus only picturing the use that's coming in. And I would generally encourage, if it's something zoning ordinance already covers, then there's no sense in adding it as a commitment, because it's a rule no matter what. If it's something above and beyond, then that makes sense to add as a commitment. So, I mean, I think you could look at, if you wanted to forbid outdoor music, of course, the question is, if something was there later on that was retail, they played music inside, and at 10 a.m., 3 notes happened to be heard by someone 50 feet away, you have to figure out where that line is. So the phrasing, I guess all I'm saying there is the phrasing of the commitment is important. Because rezoning commitments are very difficult to revoke. A special exception or a variance commitment, you can just come back to the BZA. Rezoning commitments are recorded, and to remove them, you have to go back through the entire rezoning process with all of the hearings, even if you're staying with the same zoning district. So they're not bad, and they may well be appropriate in this case. I would just say, make sure we know what it is that those who are concerned actually need targeted, and then we phrase it in such a way that it's not gonna come back to bite somebody beyond this use, and we don't just all end up here again over something incredibly common sense 5 years down the road. That it makes sense. I am gonna look up amphitheaters just to make sure, because that would be an outdoor musical event, as opposed to an interior.
Well, if I understood you correct, in your report and other conversations here tonight, you indicated that you spent a lot of time looking at the different zoning classifications, and that it was your feeling, based on what you discovered and know, that B2 has the narrowest scope, and the only other way we could look at any kind of restrictions would be to actually have the whole complete list of what ifs, to say,
The only district in business that is more restrictive is B1, neighborhood business. A reception hall is a prohibited use in B1, so that doesn't help any more than residential.
Gotcha.
Everything else is broader in what it allows.
One of the things that is allowed but only as a special exception would be a daycare or preschool.
And that could
Which
result
would
in.
have like a
Actually, that
playground.
building's pretty well,
We've seen
that's
other-
That would make a nice daycare.
We've seen other
Yeah.
churches reused that way on occasion, although I will note it comes with outdoor noise, because you do have the kids out for
Exactly.
recess and stuff.
well, that's why I'd say, I'm bringing it up, because if you want to keep that as a possibility, you wouldn't want to have a complete forbidding of any outside activities, because
Well-
you need to be able to have a playground.
Coliseums and stadiums are prohibited uses in B2, so those are some of the ones. And then there's also outdoor theaters or amphitheaters are also prohibited uses in B2, although an indoor theater is permitted. So something like a movie theater could be a possibility.
And again, that's a
Um,
building that can be used for local theater group.
Miniature golf courses are permitted. It's an odd one, but you see them sometimes in cities inside buildings. But even if they were outside, I'm not sure that they would be all that obtrusive in that location. Museums and art galleries are permitted. It would be an odd location, but it's possible. Here's one that could be dance halls and schools of dance, so like a ballet studio. That would be something that would be a permitted use that's in that recreational category. bowling alleys are permitted use, although I don't see that being a real high likelihood. I mean, that's a major conversion, because you have to get the lanes down below. You'd have to take out the whole foundation or build something up to get lanes in a building like that, but I guess you do have a long, narrow type of structure on the inside.
My biggest fear is like a restaurant going in or a bar going in, like maybe after they're done.
Okay, so
What is that zone?
for the recording, I assume, are you your neighbor? What's your name?
Andrew Armstrong?
Andrew Armstrong has a concern about restaurants and bars potentially going in a location if they were not successful. So those are uses that are going to probably, at least restaurants are going to be likely permitted, because that would be something you'd expect in B2, and that is something that you could take a commitment to ban if you wanted to make someone come back through a rezoning if they were going to put a food establishment in. Let me check bars. To me, a bar would be more concerning potentially than a restaurant. I mean, I picture like a Hoops isn't horrific, you know, and it's up. But let me look. That's in a different section here. I've got to get over to.
Does the property have access to sewer
No.
and water? I was just
Which is generally
asking.
very limiting on restaurant and bar uses.
Yeah,
That's why
that's-
you don't have a bunch out by the interchange.
Yeah.
Because, it's very expensive and very difficult because of the way things have to be separated with grease to get a restaurant approved on a septic. I can think of one we have in the county, but it predated zoning and it's been continuously reused by restaurants down on 39.
Oh, I know.
I'm trying to think if there's any others that are on septic.
So well and septic's gonna limit the use.
The well isn't an issue, but the septic
Septic
definitely
well.
is. Now, if Frankfurt annexes through there, which may happen someday, with all the housing to the east, which is the reason why that residential exists there, I mean, at that point, it would have to be rezoned anyway, and they're advisory, so then use variances are an option, so you just have there's a different planning framework there and how things get approved.
Finish your lookup,
Yeah, I got,
bars.
Could I ask one other thing while she's doing that?
Sure, Mark.
I don't mean to bypass your microphone. If you would go up there, I will.
I'll repeat it if you want me to.
Okay. I don't know if this is pertinent, but if there's a business zone in the middle of where our farms are, they've always been used for farms. Would that have any effect? I mean, I know we couldn't have a hog barn there anyway, but would that have any effect on having like animals or anything there?
Well,
other
but
than horns
didn't you
or-
say, okay, Mark Hodges asked if, having a B2 zoning in the midst of farmland would have,
Detrimental effect on
A de-
us requesting another use
okay,
in our farm.
That-
besides-
So-
that's got several layers to it.
yes,
but-
the simplest way to explain that is, no, the business district has no additional effect. However, you are zoned low density residential, which means, that cropland and orchards are permitted use. But unless there's already livestock there as a legal nonconformity, your zoning district prohibits confined feedings or animals kept in confinement. There's no way to approve them. Pasture and grazing of animals with appropriate loading for it staying 75% vegetative requires a special exception through the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that land has been zoned that way since about 77, so it's not a recent change, for what the comprehensive plan looks at. So you do have effects on livestock, but those effects have been there all along, and whether or not this property is rezoned to B2 has no effect on whether that is easier or harder. In fact, I would argue if you ended up with a housing development around you, then you do have even more restrictions. Housing would have more effect on you than a business would, because businesses do not get as large of a setback to
I think
livestock.
I have some neighbors who take care of the confinement, if I brought that up, I don't think we have.
Yeah, so if it's confined feeding, which could be as little as one horse or one chicken, but if it's been there since before the zoning ordinance, then we call it legal non-conforming. It can't expand, but it doesn't have to go away. But once it naturally goes away, it can't come back. But if there's not something there now, somebody who wanted livestock would have to look at a rezoning, and
Even if they're outdoors.
even if they're outdoors. If they're only pasture and grazing, which is kind of rare in our climate, You could do a special exception, like if somebody had a pasture and they were bringing in some cattle seasonally, but then taking them out for shelter and confined feeding for the winter, that might be a possibility. But the reason is because, those aren't the things you want inside of cities or towns, and because of the proximity and the amount of housing that sits, to your east, that land, the decision was made that that should be residential, decades and decades ago, because eventually, you've already got about 200 homes there, and eventually there's gonna be more, sooner or later. Right now, we're seeing development pressure for housing to the south finally, and then we're seeing commercial pressure out this direction. But those things have kind of varied. There was a lot of building and pressure up that way if you go back, into the 80s, and 90s. There was a ton of, most of those houses went in then. So it's just a combination of private market and what the ordinances allow and who wants to take what opportunity. But you're not gonna see more restriction on livestock if there's a reception hall or a B2 zoning district.
Did you find whether a bar can go in there?
Yeah, I found it and then I went up to double check livestock, so I'll go back down to it. Okay, here we go. So I'm just gonna read down through retail trade uses. So general retail trades, if somebody had something they were, selling inside, like clothing or, dishware, whatever, those types of uses are permitted. Restaurants are a permitted use, as are cafeterias. However, drive-in restaurants and sidewalk cafes, so in other words, if you have outdoor seating, or if you have a drive-in window, then that's a special exception use, it requires a BZA hearing. Dinner theaters, nightclubs, taverns, and liquor stores, however, are permitted uses. So if the general feeling of all concerned was that would not be a desirable location for them, and it might well not be, we would want to probably have a commitment that just limited those uses out of this particular B2 zoning district.
What's that, state that group again?
Dinner theaters, nightclubs, taverns, and liquor stores. I actually don't know that a dinner theater would be all that much of an issue, but I could see why neighbors in that location.
But are they
might-
grouped together in the ordinance?
Yes, dinner
Okay.
theaters, nightclubs, and taverns are one use, liquor stores are a second use. That would be a really odd spot for a liquor store with the size of the building, but it would also be an odd location, and I can see how neighbors might have some concern about it. It doesn't seem like it's something that's, now a dinner theater wouldn't be horrible, but I could see how there might be some desire among neighbors to have a conversation if a nightclub or a tavern was going to be involved. And I don't think you have to ban dinner theaters to, you could write a commitment that just simply says nightclubs, taverns, and liquor stores are prohibited uses
Okay.
in this particular zoning district. And, I would
I
hesitate
would
to say
think that those,
serving of,
honestly, I would think that those should be, at the minimum, a special exception.
it's an odd question
Because
because,
if you understand, a special exception means that it has to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals. In other words, it just doesn't happen automatically, which gives your neighbors protection.
and you could make it a special exception in this particular B2 district as well. I think the reason it's not overall is it is the district where you expect to find those things, and they're not generally controversial on a town square.
So if someone wanted to make a motion, they could say, the one condition is just to make these things a special exception.
You would need to write a commitment to that effect, yes, which we
Yeah.
could do. Now, I would note, you cannot force a commitment over an applicant. So you probably do need to make sure that the applicant is willing to sign, because what'll happen is then we'll create, it's a 2-page document that they sign ahead of the commissioners' meeting that basically, says that they are agreeing to be bound by that commitment and for all future landowners to be bound, and giving us permission to record it on their behalf as soon as the commissioners adopt the zoning district. The reason it's done that way in most jurisdictions is then there is no possibility of the applicant changing their mind and refusing to sign after they get the rezoning. It means we're already holding a piece of paper in hand that they have signed and authorizes us, and what happens is the commissioners approve it. We walk right upstairs to the recorder's office and record it in the next 15 minutes after the meeting, and then it's permanently binding unless it comes back to the plan commission and the commissioners and gets rezoned to remove the commitment.
The one thing I wouldn't want to see happen is, because it's an event center, I don't think that they should be restricted from having their own liquor license.
No, and I would not suggest that either, not so much
For,
their
for
own.
beer and wine or
um,
whatever, you know.
Or caterers
But
like.
caterers are what you more
caterers.
commonly see, it's
Is it,
not
okay.
having a septic for it, what we usually see in the other, like wedding barns and stuff, is because of the issue with septics, it's very, very cost prohibitive for them to get their own and have a working
Okay,
kitchen.
so they just let caterers.
So usually what happens is there's like a catering kitchen, so it's a location that has counters and things, and like Shoops will come in and they'll lay everything out in that back room. If there's a bartender, they'll come and they'll bring in stuff and they'll set it up, and then they serve in their lines, but there's no actual food prep occurring on site. And then all the waste is removed, it can't be like flushed down drains on that location. So usually you don't see a liquor license paired with most reception halls, but
Okay.
because of that.
Well, I'm not
But you
familiar
do see
with all
events come
those.
in that may have an open bar where a third party is providing that service.
I mean, it's not my dream, not on my bucket list to get into this kind of business, so I don't know all those.
No, and you're not
details.
probably gonna see that at like a baby shower, but you might see it at like.
Oh,
a
yeah,
bridal
but birthday
shower
party
where
or,
somebody might
you
bring
know,
alcohol and provide.
wedding
for
receptions,
guests.
things like that.
I would hope, maybe, I mean, I don't know, it'd be an interesting baby shower.
Does anyone, the board members, Grant, Andy, Walt, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think it's pretty much covered.
I think it's pretty covered. I'm glad to see somebody using it. And I drive by it a lot.
I
It's
know.
been sitting vacant for a while, and it's a nice building. So, I think that's awesome.
I think the staff's done a nice job of putting B2 zoning together for that. And I don't know, I mean, I think that some of your guys' concerns were met. I feel like, just approving it for B2 and kind of boxes them in. I think that property, as far as I'm concerned, is boxed in enough for some of those uses that we're concerned about. And I mean, you know, things are gonna change if Frankfurt does end up annexing it, then they're going back into, if it ever changes, then they're going back in and having to rezone it anyway.
They will, and I would note, just for board information, this is what would be termed a spot rezone, which is generally undesirable.
Yes.
If we were an advisory plan commission as opposed to an area plan commission, this is exactly what a use variance is supposed to be used for. An existing structure that is incompatible with its zoning district, but, state law does not allow us to use variances, rezonings are the only way. So, this is a case where, I guess I would note for the board, we would not want to habitually, if this was a vacant piece of property, you would see the opposite recommendation from staff. The reason why we're looking at it is because
It's
you
an
do have a
unused
building
building.
that needs a reuse, that will become a blighted building. And well, B4 would not be a spot rezoning, the types of uses in B4 and expanding that legal non-conforming, well, it's a legal area, not legal non-conforming, but as landowners mentioned, expanding that really doesn't seem like the most desirable fitting for that neighborhood either. So that's kind of why we're here, but especially for some of you that are newer on the board, I wouldn't want anyone to walk away going, well, all right, anytime any piece of property comes up, you just throw whatever on it. This is a very unique situation, which is why there's that consideration of what would be the most restrictive district, you know, to allow reuse without opening the doors to things that would be undesirable in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Okay.
I move to favorably certify the rezoning application to the Clinton County Commissioners.
Do you want to add a commitment or not?
No commitment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Andy, seconded by Grant. Let's have a roll call vote.
Clark Beard?
I would say yes. I did have some thoughts about a commitment on those things we talked about, but I think that it's best left for the commissioners and to something to sleep on for the rest of us. So I'm in favor of passing it on.
Walt Minnick?
Yes.
Andy Bailey?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Okay, so 4-0, so this isn't a done thing, I would recommend, obviously the idea of a commitment came up this evening, so for you guys as applicants, you might consider whether or not you would be okay with a commitment on that property that banned nightclubs, taverns, and liquor stores, binding on yourselves and anyone you might sell it to in the future, because that conversation may come up as the commissioners again. For those of you that are nearby landowners that it sounds like don't really have a strong objection of any kind, but you have a concern to make sure that you don't end up with something that negatively affects you, you should definitely come to commissioners meeting as well, because that commitment can still be added if it's something you feel strongly about. If it's something that you guys as applicants think about and you kind of go, we just want to offer that up, you can talk to us in the office and we could go ahead and get paperwork prepared so that it's ready for either way that it goes, which would allow the commissioners, if they wanted to add that commitment, to approve it that day instead of having to table it another 2 weeks to wait for us to get a commitment signed. Since I wouldn't automatically do one off this motion. So I guess that's the relevant information. Typically, when's the next commissioners meeting?
Well, they just had theirs today.
They did. So I
That'll
would
be the
expect this
18th.
to be the 18th.
Well, I'm pretty sure.
Let me look. I'll see if I can get you guys a general date. And you can certainly call our office to double check.
Commissioners meeting of the 18th at the airport,
At 9 AM,
because this
Because
room
of
is
early voting.
busy with early voting.
yes. So that will be at the airport, in the main terminal building upstairs, because this room won't be available.
And it'll be at 9 AM.
At 9 AM. So all that to say, if that's not sticking in your head or you have questions and you do have an interest in following this, just call our office and one of us will get you directions and times and dates.
That's what I was gonna say.
So,
Well, I think to sum it up, the decision we've made tonight doesn't box you in any way, shape, or form. And you have neighbors with concerns. It's an opportunity to take the next week or so to, maybe present something to the commissioners so they don't have to work so hard. All right, so.
and you guys are welcome to join us for fun, but if you guys have other places
Yeah,
to
you
be,
don't have to
feel like
stay.
you have to stick around for the other hearings.
The next application we have is number CC twenty twenty-two 00930, docket number 13-22 RZ, petition of Bobby J. Connor, requesting a rezone. And Liz, I'll let you kick it off with a staff report.
Yes, so as you said, this is the application of Bobby J. Connor requesting to rezone a parcel of land from the R4, which is high-density residential zoning district, to the I1 light industrial zoning district inside the town of Mulberry. This lot in question is zoned high-density residential. To the north and to the west is R3, which is medium-density residential. And then to the east and the south, you have light industrial, which is the district they're asking to move to. So this site is lot 35 in the Susanna Earhart's addition in the town of Mulberry. It's on the west side of South Elm Street between West 2nd and West 1st Streets. According to the legal description, lot 36 is part of the same legal as lot 35, but lot 36 is already zoned I1. So basically, these properties have been transferred together, and since any one of them on its own is too small to use for development, they can't be separated, even though they're two different zoning districts. Rezoning is only being requested for lot 35 because they want to make it match 36, and then the other lots they have possession of nearby, as they are planning to put some self-storage units in that area, and high-density residential would not allow that, industrial would. The area is along the south side of the city limits. It's close to the railroad as well. There's some pictures that just kind of show you where this lot is. It is a town lot, so it's not as big as you sometimes see. And this petition is kind of the opposite of the last one in that the R4 is actually kind of a spot rezoning. I think it was something that got put in there at some point in the past, and then that development never occurred. So this would actually be moving back to being zoned along with what's around it instead of being something that's different. So there's 5 criteria that the Area Plan Commission and the Mulberry Town Board, in this case you're making your recommendation to Mulberry, should pay reasonable regard to in the evaluation of a rezoning request. First, the most recently adopted comprehensive plan. So the town of Mulberry future land use map shows this area as being medium density residential and light industrial adjacent to the town's southern city limits. The lot the rezoning is being requested for is the only lot zoned R4, high density residential, and The remaining ones around it are either R3 or I1. This location is also along the railroad, and the proposed lots for this proposed project are all vacant lots, including lot 35. The petitioner is hoping to operate self-storage units on all 4 lots in that area in common ownership, including this one. They can do that with no issue on the other 3, but could not use this one as well as it stands today. The town's population is likely to stay at present levels, primarily due to lack of adequate infrastructure to accommodate significant growth, such as lack of storm sewer facilities and the cost of extending sanitary sewer lines. So a commercial development could increase the tax base on the 4 vacant lots that would give positive growth to the town of Mulberry, with also requiring significant services in terms of sewer and water as Mulberry moves forward. 2, the current condition and the character of the structures and uses in each district. So this area is residential and light industrial. It's a transitional area. This site is zoned for high density residential, which is sort of out of character with everything that is around it. 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted. So given there's already light industrial zoning here, and that the site is in common ownership with the other light industrial zoning to the south, it would be difficult to use as anything else. Currently, if they tried to separate it off to use as a residential use, it is not large enough to meet the minimum lot size requirements for the town of Mulberry, so it's actually not a useful lot at all, zoned R4. So it would seem more desirable to rezone it to match the adjacent lots so that there can be a common use across all of them, which would benefit both the town and the owner of the lots. For the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction, so half the strata uses are residential, but with the required standards for screening and buffer yards being enforced, it would appear that property values in the jurisdiction would not be adversely affected. And I would note the other 3 lots are already zoned I1, and self-storage units can go there today. So you're only talking about a 40-foot difference in where the edge of them might sit by the time you have setbacks and those things in that one corner lot. So it doesn't seem to make any significant difference. There's I1 there either way. And multi-unit apartments, if somebody, I mean, the only way you could use that is if you got a variance and you tried to put like a multiple story apartment unit on it. That would probably be just as intense or more intense than self-storage units would be. It would certainly create more traffic. 5, you have responsible growth and development. So this proposed rezoning is supported by the Mulberry Town Council, at least in general terms. They're supportive of having a business use there for tax value, and this is the path that has to be taken to get that in. Furthermore, the rezoning of lot 35, which is currently a spot zoned lot and does not match either the residential or the industrial lots in the area, would allow it to better mesh with what's there and not sort of be a standalone. Consequently, staff recommends approval and to favorably certify the rezoning application to the town of Mulberry. Of course, so we would note that any development, whether self-storage or other uses permitted in the I-1 district, will have to follow all requirements of the zoning ordinance, including lighting standards, buffer yard standards, and parking standards, as well as obtaining state design releases and other things applicable to commercial structures. So none of that goes away with the rezoning change. The town of Mulberry will have the ultimate say whichever way our board goes.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Remind you of the microphone and just state your name.
All right, I'm James Morrow with JHS Investment Group. Basically, what we're wanting to do is just rezone that. I think, from my understanding, it may have been that at one point, not sure. So we're just gonna build on the one side, approximately 60 units is what we wanna do. And everything will be lit. And as far as security, we're not going with padlocks where people can come in and cut. So we're gonna go with all digital locks, and if anybody tries to get in them without, it'll go straight to us or whoever's renting it. So there'll be good security there, and that'll keep, hopefully a little bit of traffic down in the area, because a lot of vandalism with the rundown properties is going on. So, and the area will be well lit, and then basically we're just gonna bring all the other buildings back up to par. So, I'm not, that's, about all I can say on that. far as I know. We just wanna get, we've been out there cleaning on the property now, got rid of a lot of cats, so there's already improvement. I just think this would help the whole area, so.
Okay.
That's about all I can think of at this point, unless
All right.
anybody has any more questions, so.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Yes?
I do not have my question. So, sorry, my name's Anitra McKinney, and I actually live just north of all this property that he's talking about. I live at 304 South Elm Street, which is the corner of First and Elm Street. That's where my house is. So I guess I'm just trying to, and my apologies, I didn't look at Beacon to look and see which lot is what. So, you have my house, and maybe you can help me out. You have the empty house that sits next to me.
Did you see where the rezoning sign
I haven't been out there, unfortunately, and again, my apologies. So,
As the road turns.
Right
it
across
starts
from
to
the
turn
Gold
down here.
Gate.
You are.
I'm right here, I can see my house right there. So, do you own that house?
Yes, that house is.
Okay, it's not Bobby and Jim's anymore?
Well, it's not closed, but yes, that will not, it's gonna be, we're remodeling it as we speak.
Okay.
And, as you probably tell by all the cats, we got rid of at least 40.
That was from the neighbor ladies across the street, yeah.
So,
Okay, so that house is gonna stay there, and I assume you're gonna make that a rental house?
no, it's not gonna be a rental house.
What is it gonna be if you're remodeling?
Well, we're gonna sell it.
Okay, all right, fair enough,
We're
fair enough.
not gonna rent.
So then where the alleyways are, your units are going to be south of the alleyways and
Right.
between the alleyway and Second Street, right? Okay, all right. That's just what I'm trying to figure out. Unfortunately, I caught all this when to Facebook, and I didn't even pay attention out there, and that's my own fault. So I was just trying to figure out where everything was going, because I like my house, and I don't want, I don't want something to come up by it so that, I'm not too happy if there's gonna be a lot of traffic down there, but I like my little quiet area. It's a great place for the kids to grow up. So that's just why I'm asking. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on.
You said you were 304,
Yeah, that's
see right there. Here's the lot that's requested rezoning. Here's the lots where self-storage can already go,
Because it's
zoned
Okay,
industrial.
Yep.
Yep, and then I think you mentioned a house somewhere in
Yeah,
here,
probably that one right
310
there,
maybe,
yeah,
that
probably
he
that
said
one.
he was remodeling. So this would be the lot that they're requesting to
Okay,
change
the
industrial.
grassy lot,
So
okay.
basically they can bring self-storage, up into that lot
Fair
as
enough.
well. They still have to meet setbacks.
Okay, all right. That was it. I was just trying to
Well, hopefully you got your questions answered.
gather a little more so I know what's going on. Sorry, that's
Okay.
been my neighborhood since 2007. I raised my kids there, and I just want to know what was going on.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Sorry I was late.
All right, anyone else? Yes.
My name's Lindsay Foster, and I live on Gasline Road in Mulberry. I'm a little confused because at the town board meeting, which it was not announced to anyone in town what they are wanting to do, just so you guys know, there was not a heads up given. They said they wanted over 120 storage units. That is what they said at the town board meeting, at the Mulberry Town Board meeting. So I'm a little confused because now he's saying 60, so that's a little bit concerning to me, that number is changing so much. I understand that it's already the light industrial over there. Actually, I thought it was more of like a commercial, but maybe that's the same, I'm not sure. What it shows on Beacon is just commercial, so I was a little confused.
It should be, it's blue on Beacon, light industrial.
Okay, I apologize.
No, it's fine.
So because I tried to look at all that before we came, but, because I also didn't realize that it was just lot 35 until right before I came. I was like, well, that's really strange. Why are they only rezoning one lot? But you've already answered that. So, I guess, is there some type of limitation on light industrial on how many units they can have? I mean, where are the limits? Because we've already got storage units right outside of town that already cause problems.
So what you're looking for an exact limit on units, like straightforward, no. If a factory like Frito-Lay met setbacks and wanted to go right here, right now, we would have to issue permits for it. It's light industrial. So, but there are some standards that will affect number of units, even though it's not a direct ban, and the size of his units will then affect how many he can put in. So there's a certain amount of ground that has to remain grass in any building area, so that's gonna limit how much footprint he can have. He's gonna have to put in buffer yards between the industrial and the residential districts, so that's a certain width of grass with plantings on those sides, so he can't develop there, he's gonna have setbacks from his side, his rear, and his front that he can't build within unless he goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals and asks for some permission to disobey those rules, in which case there'd be notice. So he is gonna be limited by virtue of the characteristics of the rules on the ground. If this lot is not rezoned for whatever reason, he can still do all of those things on the other three, or he could put a factory use, or he could put, any number of other uses that are permitted in the light industrial. It's just this lot would then have to be some form of multifamily apartment without having to go through an additional process. But you're not gonna find, in most zoning districts, you're not gonna find a limit on the permitted uses in terms of what they can and can't have in terms of numbers. For example, in the R4 district, you could put, if you can find a way to fit it on that ground, you could put 400 units on it. Now, I would argue based on yard and setbacks, unless that's an incredibly tall skyscraper, that's probably not gonna happen. But the point is, there's not a limit in R4 in the number of units, it's high-density residential. So then at that point, the more the merrier, and it's the same with industrial. You know, it's not something that says, well, if you're gonna put Frito-Lay here, they can only manufacture 30 bags of chips a year, you know, or whatever it is. Or if it's gonna be many warehousing, they can only have 3 units, you know, those kinds of things aren't in the ordinance. But because of space restrictions, I mean, if he wants more units, he's gonna have to make them smaller because his footprint will have some restrictions. Or he can have more larger units or some kind of mix. So it might be a good question for him if there's something changing in the plans from that perspective, but from an ordinance perspective, if it's zoned light industrial, it has to meet the standards and characteristics for that district, but there's not something that says this use can only produce this many widgets or can only have this many units, or, you know, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, it does, absolutely, I appreciate that, yeah, he also was not the one that attended the town hall meeting, so, and I understand they have probably multiple people in their company, so, just trying to clarify exactly, you know, what we're looking at here for, I mean, I don't live over on that side of town, I have friends that I know that do, but I am very invested in our town, so I just wanna make sure we're getting,
And I would
Something's
note on
not going good.
Mulberry, will, whatever recommendation this board gives, it will then go to the town. So part of why you would not have seen advertisement is it would have been improper for Mulberry to hold a rezoning hearing without first having a recommendation from the Area Plan Commission. So, well, the applicants may have gone to the meeting to have some general conversation, Mulberry could not have made a binding motion without acting out of line with state law. They have to wait for this hearing to occur and for a recommendation to arrive. And the notice you received for this, or that you saw in signs and in the newspaper, is the notice for both this meeting and Mulberry's town meeting. So when you come to this one, then you find out, okay, I need to also attend Mulberry's. And I believe Mulberry meets the second Tuesday, and we're the first week of the month, so it should be at their next meeting. You would want to attend that at its normal time, it'll be on the agenda.
thank you.
So regardless of what this board decides.
So in other words, the talk at the other town board meeting was just preliminary. Hey, are you interested in supporting this, that kind of thing? And so now we're the next step, and then they'll have the final say so.
That is the main reason we went there, was just to see if they were totally opposed, you know,
Yeah.
and then return it.
Would you care to answer her
Yeah.
on the
If
number of
it's up to
units?
And if
Is
you
it-
would repeat
so-
what you just said as well, so we don't
Yes.
have to repeat it.
Yeah, tentatively, we didn't know exactly how many units, what we was gonna do, but the reason that we even went there was to make sure Mulberry was even on board or wanted anything before we made a decision moving forward with the land. And they seemed interested, so we went the next step. But yeah, right now, we're gonna build 60 there. Anything in the bullpen would be probably outdoor storage, maybe boats, something, we haven't went that far or thought, so nothing's gonna be built across the street unless we can't do here. And then, which it might be bigger there, but we, you know, we don't know. We're trying to keep it there and then refurbish the buildings. But I know you had a concern about the other property. There was theft.
Several issues out there.
Yeah, okay, so like I told you before, the security that we're using is, a lot of people don't because of the money it takes to do it. So it'll actually have a built-in alarm for each unit, so people may break in at once, but they're probably gonna get word around and not come back. That's you know, using these special locks on it, so I would say it would probably be a good thing, so. I mean, that's, I think it addresses anything you said, right?
And everything you're gonna do out there is gonna have to be planned out on paper and coordinated with the area plan commission as far as your building permit and the inspector and all that stuff.
Correct.
So your lighting, you know, there's
exactly.
lighting ordinance, that lighting's gonna have to be a certain kind.
Yep.
You know, it can't be just big old floodlights, you know? So I think it has the potential of being a nice
We've seen
addition to the community.
tremendous increasing demand in mini warehousing, like, not just that style, but we're seeing within Frankfurt and out in the county, even, larger buildings that are being reused for interior storage, and then we have another mini warehouse looking at a huge expansion with a couple hundred units. For whatever reason, what's happening in the current environment seems to be increasing the number of people that are wanting to store stuff. I would note, on outdoor storage, that can be part of those kinds of units, but it has to be fully screened. So you're gonna have some additional restrictions that are gonna
With
fall
the
on that in terms
bullpen
of
that's there.
houses nearby cannot see whatever's parked
Yeah,
behind that
we'd have
screen.
to mesh the fence in and everything.
Yeah, and it would have to be a fence that was opaque, you know, that
Yeah,
people
and
couldn't see through.
that's kind of a down the
So-
road thing, we're,
So just making you aware there's some standards there, it's nothing to do with whether or not this rezoning goes through on your other industrial lots.
right.
The use is fine, but just making you aware you're gonna have a few standards that you'll need to meet.
Okay. Did that help with some of your questions?
It does. It doesn't really alleviate my concerns with it, but that's nothing you guys.
It's
can
not
do,
over
so.
yet either. Okay, all right. Ed, does the board have anything?
I think we have
Oh,
one
I'm
more.
sorry. Sorry, totally sorry.
Judith Hansel, 322 South Greeley Street, and this may be directed to you. Are you including, and I'm sorry, I just can't read this map, it's my fault. Are you including the fenced-in area that's across the street from the lot you're rezoning?
What do you mean include?
Is the proposal for what you're going to do,
That's already,
but is it part of what you're going to
no,
do?
we're not building on that.
Okay, all right.
What's your address?
322 South Greeley.
Okay,
corner
so you're
Second
right
Greeley,
here.
Right in the corner.
And this is the lot over here that is
Okay.
requesting rezoning. This, sorry about that. I got where we can see. Everything to the south of you and over here is zoned in light industrial
Right.
already. So, so that would not be affected. I mean, it just is what it is, you know, it
Okay.
wouldn't have anything
Okay.
additional. Mini warehousing could go down here as it is. Now, I'm not sure where the fence lot is. Is that behind your house or
Yes,
across?
exactly.
So that's this over here. Okay, so, I mean, this is where they're talking about now, but I don't know, do you also?
You looking?
36, I think, is.
That's
I'll
what
show
I
you.
heard.
These are the
This
lots.
is
Thank
the
you.
one that we're rezoning, and they own this fort here, and also this piece. This is where Eller Fertilizer used to be in Mulberry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Cause see, there's the feed mill,
Okay.
and it goes on down,
So it's towards the west side,
Yeah.
southwest side.
Okay.
yeah,
So,
right along the
I
track.
guess just for the recording, there was some, we just kind of showed people where the rezoning lot was, and there was some discussion about where a fence was relative to it and, which lot it's on. I think everybody in the audience has a general understanding of that at this point.
So, any other questions from the board?
I don't have any.
No, I don't either.
I mean, we've gotta do something with this zoning, because obviously the properties, or the town of Mulberry has to do something for anything to happen on that land for the foreseeable future, because our R4 doesn't fit any of the lots around it, so.
Not a highly desirable spot to put 20
Yeah, units.
high-end units for, you know, for a multi-unit apartment, and it would create a lot of parking congestion
Oh.
as well if you put a large apartment complex there, despite the fact that we'd have to issue the permit if someone wanted to.
And they probably don't have the sewer capacity for it, for a large development either.
It would be challenging to deal with water, knowing that already Mulberry deals with some water issues on the southern side, you know, adding a large factory or something. I mean, we can't control that, it's zoned industrial, but I could see it being challenging.
Well, their sewer capacity is very challenging.
Yeah, it is. So even within industrial, I could see some uses struggling, just given the sizes. The one nice thing about mini warehouses is, they don't have much of a sewage load, they don't have much of a water load, they don't generate large amounts of traffic. They're pretty quiet as industrial uses go, and they usually don't smell. I live over by Colfax, there's quite a few there too, and they're just part of the scenery. I don't know that you really want them on Main Street, but back, off the side, they're just kind of quiet and they're there. The newer ones have to put in landscaping versus the older ones, so that also helps soften them.
Yeah. Well, we need a motion to either favorably or unfavorably or not certify this to the,
Neutrally, you
Neutrally
have to send
certify,
it, you have
yeah.
no choice.
to the Mulberry Town Board, so.
I move to favorably certify the rezoning app, to the town of Mulberry.
It's been moved by Andy, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Grant. Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Clark Beard,
Yes.
Walt Bennett,
Yes.
Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Grant Muller.
Yes.
Okay, so I would recommend, should be for everyone present that wants to follow it, Mulberry's,
Paula tomorrow,
yep,
and they should be having a meeting, I think, next Tuesday, so I'll call Paula tomorrow and let her know that I'll be out the path for their recommendation to them. That's when they'll make a decision.
they'll make a final decision, but certainly, whether you just wanna be informed, or whether you have things you wanna have conversation with the town
That
about
hurts.
whether
looks like
mini warehousing should be limited only to the other industrial, that should stay for apartment buildings, or if, which way this lot goes.
It doesn't hurt.
Make sure you do come to the town board meeting, because they will have the final say, don't just assume tonight is the end of that conversation.
And they could even have commitments.
Yes, they could also add commitments. Although those commitments can only apply to that one lot, there's no way to extend them over any of the other existing industrial. This lot, my guess is whoever wanted to put multifamily there, for whatever other reason, their plan fell apart and didn't end up happening.
All right. You're welcome to stay or leave either way.
What about done?
We're done. Is there any other, new business or anything?
No, we still have a fee schedule conversation to have, but we weren't even sure we'd have a quorum, and we're missing a number of board members. So, I thought it would be best to just hold off on that discussion
Okay.
until we have, more people present.
Next meeting, do you know of anything coming up or?
Yes, we do have one filing so far, and I think we may have a second one.
And right
Yeah.
now,
So we'll be at the airport?
no, actually.
Where we're gonna meet at?
The airport, board has their meeting the same night we have ours, so, we are gonna be in Old Stony in the council chambers
That's the
over there.
council chambers.
Okay. I'm gonna put that on here now.
Grant, you get to go to the airport from BZA, then you get to go to Old Stony.
And then,
Why don't we just
it's
use
a
the
little
courtroom?
ways
We've
out,
done
and
that.
I haven't
We have.
looked to see, maybe I should.
My dad told me we have used the courtroom before.
Where our meeting falls relative to New Year's.
Maybe provide
Okay, so
snacks.
I'm just gonna throw this out here as food for thought, nobody needs to really make a decision now, we can wait to see if there's anything pressing. But when we get to our December meeting, we may want to discuss whether or not we wish to hold January's meeting, or if we want to defer it to a special meeting, just depending on what's happening. It is on the 3rd, so it's the day after, right there after New Year's, so I know sometimes people travel around the holidays, so I just kind of put that bug out. Just depending how the calendar falls, this year it's right there at the beginning of the month instead of the
Okay.
And our
next week.
office will be closed on the 2nd.
Yep. So, but we're back the 3rd, so that could go either way, but I guess I'm gonna just throw a bug out there. If we don't seem like we have a lot happening, the board could decide in December to just wait till February unless something urgent gets filed, and then hold a special meeting the second week of January or
Okay.
something instead of the 1st.
Or sometimes you move the December back and
And combine,
combine and
yep.
cover them both.
All right. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Meeting's adjourned.
So we've had it in my dad's courtroom before?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Really?